Hello and welcome everybody to this week's PDT podcast. This is the Streaming Teacher. My name is Roland and I'm a personal development tutor at Edinburgh Napier University. In this week's podcast, I want to start a little series talking about how to be successful as a student and what skills and abilities you will need for that. But before I start, a quick reminder for all my students, please do not use the chat, but email me instead. For everybody else, please feel free to like, subscribe, and comment. And for all those that want to go the extra mile, especially all you educators watching, I have put Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, and crypto links in the usual place. But now, let's begin. And the beginning is titled How to Become a Master Student. So I'm looking specifically at the postgraduate level in the United Kingdom in the British education system. In recent years, it has become more and more important that universities as well as students realize that a postgraduate study is very, very different from an undergraduate study or your high school time. And that is particularly the case for all those students that have not been raised and come up in the British education system during their high school time or in their bachelor. And I want to talk about the first two items on this list, looking at what is actually success, how do we define that, and to look at what are the requirements of the job market of the 21st century. Now, looking at what is a success. So for some people, it may be to have an expensive car, a fast car. Other people think it's living in a big mansion, and yet others are comparing how big and expensive their yachts are. Some of us are looking at different things and they want to be popular in society. So no matter what it is an individual perception of what is an achievement and what achievements are you looking for. And when I say achievement, I mean a goal that you have set that has come true for yourself. But why are goals so important? And I like to share a couple of quotes from Confucius and Seneca the Younger, two philosophers, one from ancient China and the other one from the old Roman Empire. Worry not that no one knows you. Seek to be worth knowing. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. And Seneca the Younger says, if a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. And those things are very, very true. If you worry about that no one knows you, why not instead focus on yourself and make your actions speak for you so that people want to know you? Even the biggest task, like moving a mountain, begins with very small steps towards your final goal. And that is true for every single goal. When it is obvious that the goals cannot be reached, don't adjust the goals, adjust the action steps. That is true as well. If you don't succeed and if you don't achieve what you want to achieve, have a very good look at what you have done in order to achieve that and rethink your approach. But most importantly, if you do not have a goal, if you do not know which goal you want to achieve, which port you are sailing to, then it doesn't matter in which direction you are going because you will not reach your goal. If it is important, you will find a way. Otherwise, you will find an excuse. Vision without action is daydream. Action without vision is nightmare. Vision with action can change the world. But as I said earlier around, quoting Confucius, you need to start with the little steps. Little steps will amount to a mountain upon which you can build. And everybody is now asking how, obviously. So one thing I found very, very easy for students to understand is the AIR. Analyze, implement, repeat. If you have determined what your goal is, and if you have determined what your current abilities are, take an action step and then analyze what has happened. Are you closer to your goal? If so, continue on that route. If not, go back to the drawing board and look at what do I actually have to do? How can I achieve it? Seek inspiration from others. But how do we do that? How do we set realistic goals? So the first thing that I want to make clear to people, and that is the first thing I tell students when I'm teaching, it is not important what you think is required. It is important what the job market tells you what is required. And a lot of people have a problem with that. Now, the ideal candidate for any organization, any position is 18 years old, single, 10 years work experience, speaks 4 languages fluent, has a master's degree, and works for minimum wage. Now, we all know that is very, very unrealistic, but why do we want young people? We want young people because we can still form them as an organization. We can much easier tell them what to do and how to do things than somebody who has been on a similar job for 10, 20, 30 years. We want our candidate and the people that we hire to be single. Why? Well, if they have a family, they have other commitments outside of work. Purely speaking from an organizational perspective, I want my workers to focus on work and work alone. I also want that person to have a lot of work experience. And you can see that these things are partly contradicting one another. I also want somebody that speaks multiple languages, so I do not have to pay for translators when a client, a supplier, is talking to me in a different language that I don't understand. We want people that have a good level of education, so they know more things. They can bring more education to our organization, and we don't want to pay a lot for that. So, as you rightfully will analyze, that candidate does not exist. But this kind of demand has existed for more than 20 years. And it's unlikely that this ideal perception will change in the very near future. So what we need to do as members of the job market, people that are looking for a job, we need to come as close as possible to these requirements. Now, we don't get younger. We do have a family. Some of us at least do. Work experience, well, we need to work in order to get that. Fluent in 4 languages, well, are you paying for all that knowledge? Speaking a language is not an exercise in learning vocabulary and grammar. You actually need to immerse yourself in the language. And once you start being able to think in a different language, when you understand the culture that is behind that language, when you become a professional language user, you are definitely not going to work for minimum wage. Employers know all that. and they will pay premium price for premium candidates. But for your run-of-the-mill candidate, well, for that kind of candidate, the employer is asking, well, what are you bringing to me? Not how much do you want me to pay you? And I think we can all agree, we would prefer to be a candidate where the employer says, well, how much do you want for working for me, and not going somewhere else. Now, I said a lot of people, not only students, have a problem with this kind of mindset. And many, many times, and it reflects in students' work, what I see is, I think, I want, I like. Another close favorite is I believe. All of that is not a requirement, and your employer doesn't want to know what you think. Your employer doesn't care what you want, it's what they want. And whether you like working for them or not is immaterial to the person that is employing you. Market requirements are determined by the market. And what is required for a certain position, you can, as a first step, look at a job description. Job description actually do mean a lot. It tells you what kind of person is this organization looking for? What kind of skill does this person need to have to fulfill the requirements that are posted in that job description? You can look at publications from the World Economic Forum, for example, Skills 2025, where companies are telling the World Economic Forum and determine in their surveys what kind of skills are organizations looking for the next 5 or 10 years. When you have made a choice of a career or a career direction, you can look at professional publications or look at professional organizations, what they are saying, what are the topics they are talking about, what are the things that are written in publications, where does the next step in research go. For example, as a project manager, you will be looking at publications from PMI, APM, or IPMA. You will be looking at what are the trends that they publish on their websites, in their organizations. What are other project managers talking about? And particularly the top people in the profession, they will not talk about what they think, what they want, and what they like. When you pay attention to those kind of outputs, and when you look at the factual content of that, you can determine, well, what are the requirements and where do I stand in terms of my capabilities. Like, want, think, and believe are completely irrelevant. Reality happens whether you like what is happening or not. Outside the weather, it is raining whether you want it to rain or not. And whether you think that is good or not, the weather does not care. And whether you believe or not it is raining, it doesn't matter. If you go outside when it's raining, you get wet. This seems to be very, very simple. This seems to be, yeah, everybody knows that. But when it comes to work, when it comes to the job market, when it comes to studies, suddenly this doesn't seem to be the case. When I was a program lead at another university, I really liked doing 2 polls with my students. In the first poll, in the second or third session of the semester, I asked them, imagine you are a decision maker in a company. and you are hiring for a certain position. You have a job description and you have a candidate applying for that job that is a perfect match for this. When you look at that candidate's education history, you see straight A's everywhere. So of course you're going to interview that person. Now imagine further that in that interview you realize that person does not know what they are talking about. A staggering 99%, you always get a 1% joker, but 99%, the vast majority of people says, I'm not going to hire that person. A few said, well, I want to know why is this discrepancy happening between on paper this is a perfect candidate and in reality this is so bad what I'm seeing. A couple of weeks later, I ask students the question in a different way. I ask them, imagine I'm the person interviewing you. And I realize in the interview, you are not a good match for that job. And I'm telling you that. Yeah? I give you feedback and I say, okay, this, and this is things that we can't work with. Sorry, but you won't get that position. And I'm asking students, what is the next thing? And more than 70% of students are giving me all kinds of reasons why I should still hire them. Absolutely no one realizes that this is the same question asked from a different perspective. And if it is the same question, why should there be two different realities? Reality is fact. If you want to go in a certain direction, you need to know what is the goal, and you need to know where you are right now. Without those two pieces of information, without critically reflecting on yourself, your skill set, without an honest acknowledgement of what is the set of requirements that I need to fulfill to be successful as, for example, a project manager, for example, an electrical engineer, for example, I don't know, a student counselor. If you are not honestly engaging with both sides of that story, the only thing that will happen to you at some point in your life is you will be disappointed. And the journey to that disappointment will not be a happy one either. Those are things that I'm trying to avoid as an educator. Those are the things that we as all educators should avoid. We need to find a way that students are getting a true picture of this is what life after your degree is like. These are the requirements you need to fulfill in order to get a meaningful degree out of this. As Winston Churchill used to say, the truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, there it is. That means we can't change the reality. And if there is a requirement for a certain position which we simply do not fulfill, then the chances for us to be in that position is very, very low. Another form of reality check from the same person, it is not enough that we do our best. Sometimes we must do what is required. Sometimes we must do things we don't like. Some things we don't want. Some things we don't believe are useful. But there is a reason for these things as a stepping stone from A, your starting point, to Z, where you want to be. No one likes hearing the truth. And I experience that so often when people are confronted with very negative reality, and hint, hint, we just had result release, and some people get results that they really don't want to have. But it's not happening on that day. The accident happened long before that. And in that sense, I want to finish off with a quick look at how do we determine capabilities? How do we take a genuine look at what is a requirement and how do I compare to that requirement? Now, I mentioned critical self-reflection, and particularly in societies where criticism is not very common, or in societies with what is called face culture, your honor, how other people view you. This is very, very difficult to instill in students. We have the obvious Myers-Briggs test. I personally like to use the discovery wheel and an in-detail skill set analysis. Now, this step is probably the most crucial in your whole journey. If you have a goal, and we all have goals, if you do not know where you stand, then it is very, very difficult to find a direction, to find a course. It's also not helpful that we all have our very own interpretation of the reality around us. And in order to take that subjectiveness out of the equation, we need people around us that give us unfiltered feedback. Now, it is often said that a good friend is not a friend that says yes. A good friend is not the person that says, no matter what you do, they keep saying, oh, you are brilliant, you're fantastic, that was great. A good friend is telling you, now, that was nonsense. A good friend tells you when you have done something that is not your best. A good friend will tell you, oh, you can do that better. And if they are a really good friend, they will be with you on that journey. They will help you to find and redirect you. Now, how do we deal with those setbacks? We need to first look at who says what to us. When do they say it? Why do they say it? And sometimes we need to look at how they say it. Now, who gives you feedback? In terms of a student, you receive feedback from not only other students, you mostly receive feedback from faculty, from people that have been studying the thing you are trying to learn for many, many years. So the chances are that they do know more about it than you do. The next question is, well, what do they say? And they will not only say good, bad. They will tell you why is this the case? Why is this a good idea? Why does this not work? When do they say that? At any given time, and I hope this can be more spread across universities. I hope that more educators are doing this in this kind of fashion, is that we can give people feedback when they ask for it, not only in their assessment. So one of the things I really liked doing when I was a program lead is I offered people to write an essay, because most of the people that came to me as postgraduate students, they never wrote an essay before. And I said, this is the topic, these are the requirements, these are the marking criteria, you have 1 week. Now, obviously, if you have never done that before, you are not going to write a good essay. Yeah? Okay, some people are natural geniuses and they will produce something that is really totally breathtaking. I also told students I will be very, very harshly critiquing that essay. I will be extra, extra, extra hard. And in that feedback, I was extra hard. I also took students aside and sat down with them explaining the feedback. Okay, this is what it means. Yeah? And what I realized, that even though this was a very small exercise and the next essay they wrote to get a mark in the module that I was teaching was much, much better than the test essay that they wrote at the beginning of their study. Now, one of the things I want to look at, why do we give feedback as faculty? It's not only because that is what we are supposed to do, that is in our job description. I think every educator genuinely wants their students to get better. But how do we get better? For example, by trying something, failing, looking at the reasons why we fail, and then doing it better another time, and another time, and another time. And very, very strangely, it is usually the students that get marks in the distinction range that come to me and say, well, what can I do better next time? And as much as I would want to say, well, just do the same thing, this is great, that is also not a helpful feedback. So when you are getting feedback, especially on assessments, that you don't like, consider this. The people that give you the feedback know more about the subject. They are genuinely having the desire to make you better. Truth hurts, and I want to go and explain this, this situation, and that the negative reaction to failure, although it is normal, is something that we need to start looking at differently. Now, Levine, Festinger, and Schein are researchers in change management. And they looked at why are people so resisting to any form of change. And they found out that, psychologically speaking, when you have been doing something, especially when you have been doing it for many, many years, when you have done it many, many times and you believe, well, I can handle this pretty well, and you have a negative experience from that, for example, getting negative feedback on an essay, automatically you reject that because, well, everybody else tells me I write great essays. Everybody else tells me I am very smart in this subject. And now somebody tells me this is not the case. I don't like that. What we as human beings need is a psychological bubble of comfort. And we tend to create this feel-good place for ourselves. And when reality challenges that comfort, it is only natural that we resist what is challenging our comfort, because we want to remain in our comfort zone. And what Schein determined is, at any given moment, a human being in their psychological state is in a sort of equilibrium. Yeah, everything is balanced. Then you have reality that is asking every single human being to adapt on a daily basis. And he calls that balance an equilibrium between two different forces. It's the driving forces, the forces that want you to change, and the restraining forces, all the forces that want you to stay in your comfort zone. When these are balancing each other out, nothing is happening. When the restraining forces are larger, you don't have any need for change. But when the driving forces become larger and larger, and there are many ways this can happen, human beings start to be more inclined to adapt to a new reality. Now, going back to dealing with setbacks, dealing with negative feedback. That negative feedback is still reality. It's a fact. And the change that is required in order to get a better feedback, in order to perform better, whether it is in an assessment or in real life outside the university, this reality will continue to exist no matter whether you change or not. But the longer you stay in your comfort zone, the bigger the gap between you and your comfort zone on one side and reality on the other side will become. It will be more and more difficult to change. It will be more and more difficult to catch up with the world that has moved on. If we look at this from a graphic perspective, we have a certain development where reality is driving along. Imagine a line that goes steadily upward. Sometimes it goes a little bit down, then it goes upward again. And now imagine your perceived reality or your actions in order to exist in that reality. That curve is much, much lower. And when the reality curve goes up, but you keep going sideways, the gap becomes bigger. That phenomenon is called Martek's law. I made a video about that one as well. And I do encourage you, do read up on Martek's law. It's a concept from marketing, but it applies to so many situations in change management and in human behavior. Once you understand that, I hope you will get a eureka moment and say, well, I don't want this to happen. I really want to start changing. Then the question is how? And that is something that is very individual. When we look at the driving and restraining forces in a little bit more detail. So for example, driving forces could be new challenges, whether it's in your job or in your study. It could be that we reward or you receive a higher reward for a new behavior or for a new skill. Or for example, at work, the boss will be not on your back so much and just leave you alone because they know you're doing a good job. Then there's also the restraining forces. You are afraid to lose your job. And you think, well, that change is really boring. Why do I have to do that? Or you could be afraid that adapting to this change will change your position to a lower one. The solution to move forward is the incentives need to be larger than the restraint. And that needs to happen, well, the sooner the better, because this situation where there is a new challenge, where there is the demand for change, where we are restrained, whether by our own choice or by something we perceive as inevitable, we don't want to be wrong. We want to be right, and we want our comfort zone to be the right place. And that will cause a lot of psychological stress. One of the things that especially international students experience here in the UK, not only in the UK actually, it's everywhere. The moment students step outside of the airport at their final destination, the moment they go on their final mile of the journey, so to speak, they start mostly subconsciously realizing, well, I'm not at home anymore. I am far away from home. People here don't speak the same language, perhaps. People behave very differently. One common thing here in the UK is, oh, it is 20 degrees colder than the place where I'm from. All that is compounding into stress that if we don't deal with that, both you as a student and we as a university, it takes away your mind from what is more important, the thing that you came here for, your degree, the assessments that you need to complete well in order to get a meaningful degree. Now, I want to finish this with a little excursion about who do you actually compete with, or who do we all compete with? Now, at Edinburgh NIPE, we have a lot of international students. And I like asking them, well, why did you come here? What were the reasons for you to say, I want to be a student? What were the reasons for you to say, I want to be a student in a certain program that my university is offering? Then the question is also, well, why do you go to a foreign country? All these things are questions that you need to find an answer for. I can't give the answer for you. But there's always something, and I can tell you that, there's always something that people are looking for when they go on such a huge endeavor. And it is a huge endeavor. A lot of people are away from home for the first time in their lives. A lot of people have never been abroad. Almost nobody did a postgraduate study before they come here. These are all things that you should be considering when you are evaluating yourself, when you are looking at how can I turn this into a success? Because at the end of the day, the job market is global. If I, as an employer, want to hire the best people, I need to look everywhere. And the best people are not necessarily living next door. They could be living on the other side of the planet. And make no mistake, if an employer really, really, really wants someone, even if they are from far away, even if they are demanding a very high salary, they will get that person. Now, in the 21st century, especially now after COVID, we have so many jobs or so many employers that are offering people to work remotely or on virtual teams. Yeah? We want the best people working for us. We don't want the best people to work for another company and make that company better at our expense. Take that into consideration when you are looking at, what do I want out of this study? Why am I doing this? And whatever the reasons are, whatever the answers are that you are giving yourself, make sure you are honest with yourself. As I used to say, and I will show you that one later on the discovery wheel, don't think about what answer I want to hear. If you give me an answer that I want to hear or that an employer wants to hear, you are not honest with yourself. You will put yourself in a starting point that is not your real starting point. It will be something that doesn't exist. And it will be very, very difficult for you to realize why things don't work out, because you think, well, I completed all these steps. Critically look at yourself. Look at what you're good at. Look at what you're not good at. Use feedback to get a different perspective. Now, I mentioned discovery wheel, and this is what it looks like. I really like doing that because it is that simple. And once you have done this, you can say, okay, I scored this number in memory, for example. And when I look at where I want to go, what is the requirement at that job? It's different. So either I have not enough skills in that area, or my skills are already an overmatch. So you can focus on something else. But once again, if you are not honest about this, if you're not honest to yourself, the only person that you are cheating on is you and the future you. One thing I keep telling students when they realize I'm falling short of the requirements, and when I'm honest with myself, I won't be able to achieve what is required. Now, I think every boy, when they are young, wants to be a professional sports star. They want to play football, they want to be the next Cristiano Ronaldo, but by the age of 25, most of us realize that won't happen for us. I have seen an example, for example, a very famous Premier League football club. One of their youth teams, the under 15s, under 14s, they have 20, 25 players, good players. And one of these players will get a chance to play for the first team that plays in the Premier League. Now, why are the other 19 there? So that one person that may be a star in the future has someone to play with. And we are not talking about just 19 other people from the street. We are talking about really, really good football players. But the level of skill required to play in the Premier League is so much higher. Another example is, I recently started to read books and the thoughts of Thomas Sowell, one of the most intelligent people that I have ever come across with. And he says that many, many years ago, Stanford University did a research, and they followed the careers of almost 1,500 very intelligent people with an IQ of over 140. So very, very, very intelligent people. And they realized that the difference in outcome 10, 20, 30 years after they initially were surveyed was staggering. And when they looked at the different deciles, top 10%, next 10%, and so on up to the bottom. In the bottom 10% of these very intelligent people, only 8 had a postgraduate degree. And there were a lot of people that didn't even have a high school diploma. Very intelligent people. In the same intelligence level, in the top 10%, you had many, many more people that had a postgraduate degree. And when you look at it from this perspective, even in a tiny minority of 1,500 very intelligent people, you have so many different outcomes, such a vast discrepancy that success doesn't seem to be very likely. On the other hand, when you truly know what are my skills, what am I good at, what can I do better than many, many other people, and when you focus on that, when you maximize the benefit of your skill set, then how can you not be successful? Maybe you will still not play football in the Premier League, but if you have a realistic appreciation of yourself and the requirements of the job market, you can always find something you can be successful with. Now, as a closure, I want to look at different learning styles and look at the question, does it really matter what your learning style is? Now, there is a lot of research recently going into that. And I do recommend for everybody who is interested in such topics to read Henning Beck's book about how the brain actually works, because until very, very recently, we had a very wrong understanding of how thinking works, how the brain functions. But what we can say is that every learner is different. On the other side, facts and knowledge have a definitive existence. They exist, but how you discover them, how you understand them, is a very individual event and process. Now, your learning style can significantly correlate with that, but it's not causally linked with knowledge or knowledge acquisition. In other words, the learning style doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand what you are learning, and that can happen in any kind of learning style. At the end of the day, you can also put it like that. The skills matter, not necessarily how you got them, not necessarily how you started understanding why do things function, why do things work in the way they do. But I think that is enough for today. Thank you very much for all the attention, and I will see you all in the next video next week.